Hi everyone, thank you very much for stopping by and returning to the old world. Warhammer is back. This time as a roleplay game set in the world that was. Now it's been many a long year since Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 3rd edition, which itself took a massive leap away from the tried and loved methodology of the 1st and 2nd editions. So what is this news when it comes to the forthcoming Old World edition? Now, we don't yet have a release date, bar the fact that we're told the game is very close. But there is now information out there, and this has been made available through wargamer.com. Initially, we're told we can expect a player handbook and a GM guide to be released fairly close together. There's a comment there about the slightly chaotic release of the more recent D&D game. I'll be honest, I personally much prefer the one rule book to, rule them all approach. Roleplay games can be expensive, and if you're going to have to buy quite a few books, then this can start to get a little bit expensive. And we know that roleplay games generally are for people who are richer in time than they're necessarily in finances, particularly when compared to a conventional war game such as Warhammer the Old World, where there's actually quite a lot of expenditure on models that you need to do, but once you're up and running, you just need to find a couple of hours here and there to play a game. Now, admittedly, we don't know the price point just yet, or certainly I don't know the price point of these books just yet. And I also appreciate that commenting around, oh, that's a lot of books, it's going to get expensive, it's a bit rich from someone who plays Warhammer, where you've got your rule book, your Ravening Hordes style book, and your Arcane Journal, which you're using unless you want to use the Grand Army composition. There's always an extra thing to purchase. Let's have a bit of a look into this new rule system. Warhammer Roleplay Old World Edition is going to be moving to a system where you have a pool of D10 rather than using the D100 system. And this is said to be a design choice to make the game easier to understand. I have to admit, though, I did find D100s pretty easy. It's just a percentile system. Now, how it's going to work is your characteristic stats provide you with a number of dice, and your character skill is your target number. So this should make it easy for players to be able to spot whether they've got a success or a failure. But on the flip side to that, it does mean it makes it more difficult for a games master to apply a little bit of fudge in order to aid the story. Unless, of course, there's going to be hidden modifiers which need to be taken into account. While we're on the subject of skills and characteristics, it should be noted that we're told there's going to be less than 20 skills in play. This is rather different from the pages and pages of skills which existed, certainly in the likes of 1st edition of Warhammer Roleplay. However, this as a sales point seems a little bit odd. Why? Because we've just been told that when you're doing a skill check, you're rolling a number of dice given by a characteristic against your skill in a level in a particular thing. So you'll have a number against your skills. This sounds to me like for each of the 20 skills, you'll have a baseline number. Whereas in the early Warhammer roleplay games, the skills pretty much have either allowed you to do something on top of the usual abilities, or they gave you really a modifier to your skill check. So it sounds like skills will actually be very different in how they operate within this game. Let's move on to combat. And we're told that combat is going to be absolutely brutal. It's still opposed roles, but with an extra weight on storytelling. Now, I'm hoping that there's some real benefits coming out of this. In my experience of playing Warhammer Roleplay, certainly the earlier editions when we were in the D100 system, if you had two fairly high level characters, be it player character or NPC, it became really difficult to actually hurt each other because you were both rolling with a very high percentage chance of succeeding in your attacks / parry ripostes, etc. And this could lead to fight scenes becoming quite protracted and pretty dull. So if this changes and we get much quicker action scenes, I think that is absolutely for the better, because whilst combat does play a really important part in roleplay games, such as those set in the Warhammer universe, spending a protracted period of time just trying to get through your opponent's guard eventually just becomes a little bit wearing, and you want to move on with the story. So hopefully this new approach will be getting better. We're also told as part of this that there's a different approach to injuries. So if you're hit, you get staggered again, you're starting to roll on the injury table. The more injuries you get, the more rolls you're having to make then on the table. So the situation can get really, really dicey. And characters aren't going to have hit points. There's no certainty when weighing up a situation that I've got X number of hit points, I'm fighting a goblin, that's got Y number of hit points, therefore this is how things are probably going to go out. So it sounds like you're going to have to weigh up the risks, the opportunities, because things could potentially go very, very wrong very, very quickly. And you know what? I kind of like that. It takes away the metagaming side of just knowing the stats of the game really well and allows for a more realistic environment where you're having to think around, is my character really able to achieve this? What could potentially happen here? As opposed to, I know he's going to have a weapon skill no higher than this, therefore I will succeed this percentage of the time, etc. Connection to the world is also something that's going to be quite important to the new game. And they have taken steps apparently to remove the, I happen to know this really important person that I just made up, which will make everything really easy, I'll go and speak to my contacts sort of moment from a game. So for the example mission that's going to be in the GM's handbook, there's going to be a chart for contacts players might feasibly know, and there'll be a roll of that at the start of the game. So that gives you a bit of control over what kind of introductions can be made. And the point is made that if you're not basing a game in that particular town or using that particular campaign, you could still use those charts as inspiration for identifying who people might feasibly know in the game to prevent this kind of, again, kind of metagaming approach to it, making it more realistic and more around the storytelling. As for career classes, we're told there's going to be 30 of them, down from around 64. The rat catcher is still, however, a thing. And the various classes will come with some starting assets, be it a small farm, an alchemist shop, or the ever-faithful rat catcher's dog. I really like this. I think it's a great way to enable a GM to add some story elements to it. If you're away from your small farm, which you and your family rely on to survive, things could happen back at the farm. Do you carry on with your adventure? Do you rush back to try and take on the bandits that are threatening the family farm, etc., etc.? There's also, we're told as part of the initial campaign, there's going to be multiple protagonists trying to influence the party, pull them in different directions. This suggests to me that we're looking at a busy world setting. There's lots of stuff going on. And as a GM, you'd be able to really hopefully dive into that, to have lots of influences and things that your players can get involved in. Personally, for games I've GM'd in the past, I'm a big believer in letting players very much choose their own adventure. It does make it more difficult for the GM, but if a group of players want to go and do a particular thing, then I'm always a big fan of letting them do that. And remembering firmly, from my perspective, that I'm trying to have them live and breathe in a dynamic world setting. There's lots of stuff going on all over the place. And it's not just a case of the quest givers. If you look at computer game sort of settings, they can very much go off and effectively make their own quests if they really want to. The one thing we've not heard anything about is how magic will work, or even if you're going to be able to be a great, powerful mage at some point in in the game. I'd imagine wizardry and witchcraft will be a thing. I've seen people definitely play with magic systems in roleplay games, and they verge from the very simple to the ridiculously complicated. So I'll be really interested to see what comes out when it comes to casting spells and how this is going to be played in the game. Are wizards going to be the really weak characters that suddenly become superhuman, powerful demon slayers? Is it going to be a system which relies on knowledge of the game to be able to put together the right combination of things? Who knows? So yeah, be interested to see how that goes, because in the experience I've seen of the way people have approached magic and different systems, or even just home brewing new rules around the Warhammer system, magic can become incredibly complicated and not particularly player, or in fact GM, friendly. So that aside, I have to say I've not played in an RPG for quite a few years now, but this one does have me quite excited, and I'm definitely going to be following the news around its development and hopeful fairly prompt release. Let's face it, I have to admit I am very much a narrative sort of player when it comes to games like Warhammer. And the idea of having a fairly normal person just trying to survive and then expanding their horizons, fighting against the odds in the very rich and quite engaging, I think, Warhammer setting is something that is music to my ears and right up my alley. All that remains for me to say is thank you for listening to my comments on this particular topic. If you're interested in the roleplay environment, do let me know down in the comments below, and I'll be able to bear this in mind for future videos. Also, there's always the usual like, subscribe, etc. if you want to keep on track of the videos that I'm producing. It would be a massive help. Thank you. Once again, thank you very much for listening. I am returned to the old world. Have a great day.